I loved California, but being a business owner in the state of California, it is not employer friendly. And my entire family is leaving. Sister's already gone with her 2 kids. My husband's already gone. I'm leaving in April. Brother, my sister-in-law are leaving in April. My sister-in-law's family is leaving. We're all leaving.
I think the government of California thinks of the taxpayers as an ATM machine. You want more money, just go back to the ATM machine. Just go take more. You just take more.
The regulations are true business impediments. Some business owners refer to the state of California as the Department of Business Prevention.
We have the PAGA law, Private Attorney General Act,
where an attorney can become the general attorney of the state and represent the state against a business. And it could be for something really small, like, oh, you had a typo on the paycheck. For a certain period of time, you had this typo, and you paid everybody the same amount, but there was a typo.
That cost us, I think we ended up paying out a little over $30,000 plus our attorney's fees. So it was $37 or something that we didn't pay an employee. We didn't realize it, and he never said anything, and then a few months later, we got served with a PAGA claim.
And $30,000 may not seem like a lot of money to some people, but to a small business, family business, that'll make or break you.
Well, and I think our legal fees were almost equal to that. So, you know, out of pocket about $60,000. You can't make a mistake.
Any lawyer can come along and file a lawsuit against any business for violating these different aspects of the labor code, which is something like 1,000 pages. Instead of having a law that allows businesses to cure the violation and go about their business, no, it's going to be a big shakedown from private attorneys who say, I'm going to file this unless you settle with me. And this is particularly rough on small businesses.
You know, it's all starting to come back. So he was a current employee when he filed, so he was not an ex-employee. So we were in the middle of closing the facility where he worked. We had to keep him employed because we can't retaliate. And so he basically became, I can do whatever I want because they can't do anything. So, you know, we're trying to take care of people with special needs. We're trying to operate a business. We've got a PAGA claim, and we've got an employee that is out of control, and there's nothing we can do.
So that's one example of how the PAGA law creates an unfriendly business climate. And there are lawyers who make a really good living finding these little details and looking for ways to shake down businesses for settlements.
Once they open a PAGA claim, they look for a laundry list of things wrong, because the more things they can find wrong with an employer, the more money they can get. You know, I had one employee from Texas calling me. He's like, you need to pay me my money or I'm gonna sue you too. And it was like, I don't owe you any money. You know, I mean, it's like, pay you what money?
I mean, if we underpay someone by $30, they should be required first to go to their employer and figure it out with their employer. If you notice that you have a discrepancy on your paycheck, or if there's something that you don't understand, you should immediately be able to go. That should be the first step of period. All of the paperwork, dealing with the attorney, sending in all the information while we still have a business to operate with no secretary, no administrative help, was very difficult. At one point, we employed almost 50 Californians and had 25 beds to serve people with developmental disabilities. That's a lot, and that shows how much we were committed to a population in the state of California that most people don't care about. But when you're up against a state and you're up against, I don't know, it just changes your whole view. It's like, why am I going to work so hard for a state that doesn't work hard for me?
They are very punitive, and they're very nasty to businesses, and they're very nasty to taxpayers in California. And the general sense is that California treats businesses like criminals and taxpayers like organ donors. And people get tired of it, and they begin to feel ground down. And then they talk to someone in another state where it's not like that, and that's why people are leaving.
You know, if we're talking about comparing California, Arizona, or California to Texas, or pick a state, one looks at what the what is occurring in the state, what the legislature in that state is doing. And California is, right, wrong, or indifferent, prioritizing social issues.
And I don't know the history of laws. Like, I don't know the history of how much the employee laws have changed. What I do know is that our employee handbook went from 12 pages to 60 pages in less than 10 years.
Today's hearing one is in person.
You know, it's the old joke that you're always in terrible danger when the legislature is in session. But we seem to see that. I mean, every time the legislature is in session, we seem to see more proposals that are anti-business.
We used to have a legislature full of business owners, small business owners, people who were in top positions in a company who understood the importance of the private sector and appreciated what businesses had to go through to either open up a business or stay in business.
We recently at Chapman, along with UCI and UCLA and UCSD, the University of California at San Diego, we worked together to formulate a questionnaire that we sent out to chief executive officers of companies throughout the state. And we asked them, how do you feel about doing business in California? What are the prospects of your business relocating out of the state? And we're coming back with as many as 50% of the CEOs suggesting that we're planning to leave California in the future. Why? The two things that were cited, high taxes and high regulation, and the second thing, high housing prices.
California, a little bit of paradise. Beautiful. Productive. Exciting. Growing. Many influences have joined together to mold the California we know today. What is this California way of life?
After World War II, California was still a relatively new state, and so the 40s were a period of building, working together to build something. The 50s was enjoying middle-class America, and people in California were harmoniously working together in a new state, new way of life, single-family homes and single-family neighborhoods. You had opportunity.
Here the residents lead happier lives, healthier lives that directly benefit for home and industries where they work.
When my grandparents were starting their family, my grandmother was a stay-at-home mom, and my grandfather did not have a full college education. And he drove around Los Angeles delivering bread, and that was his job. And they were able to make life work such that they were able to purchase a home. It wasn't handed to them. They had to want it and plan to own a home, but it was within reach for them. It was possible, it was on the table, and it was absolutely a normative option for people in their same situation. Oh my gosh. $3 million. Those are larger, but this is like a normal house. Like, we walk by this house. $1.2 million. Even though we're working hard, even though we're trying our best, we'll never be able to achieve the life that our parents achieved or our grandparents achieved. So that's where the homes are. The housing market is outpacing even my ardent savings efforts. I think it makes people feel discouraged, and it makes people feel like the environment around them isn't the fertile soil it once was to create a great life for themselves and for their children and grandchildren.
Things were relatively easy to build in California in the 60s and 70s. I think that's where we got our reputation as this kind of land of opportunity in California, the California dream. People could move here, they could create a great life. That is very hard to find today because of the cost of housing. And every year since 1970, whether it's the environmental laws like CEQA or whether it's local laws like zoning laws, they've gotten more complicated, more dense, more expensive to comply with, and they allow less and less building.
The number one reason why I stopped developing housing in California was that in order to get projects approved, it was so long and so expensive that a small developer like myself doesn't have the capital to buy a piece of land and hold it for 2 or 3 or 4 years to see if it'll get approved. California, if you want to rezone property, have it annexed in, it has to go through a certain process, an environmental impact report process. That process is like documents that I have that are just, pages and pages thick, all sorts of different reports that you have to pay to get done. And anybody who's not even a neighbor, not even near, can sue and say they don't agree with how you were solving that problem in that environmental impact report. In other states, if you want to sue, you have to have some standing. Here, anybody can sue to stop a development from going forward.
Tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, I've seen cases of millions of dollars of litigation fees in order to block the project. And you often end up with projects that just don't get built because they're no longer economically feasible due to CEQA, or it's built 5, 7, 10, I've seen a case of 40 years of litigation in order to get permits finally approved. So you can imagine if in order to build something, you can't just buy the land, hire the contractors, get the materials, bring all of your innovation and business savvy and build something, but you've got to wade your way through a decade of court. Who's going to build in California?
You have to find a way to pay for the land and all the lawsuits and all the things you went through, so you will have to charge more for the other homes that you're building. So essentially, when you buy a home, you're paying a lawyer as some sort of a fee that you don't know about and you didn't see. We're funding lawyers through our housing costs.
But then you also have a thing where the restrictions of growth. You look at maps, you see the map, and it shows the town kind of where they grew out to, and they kind of all stop at a certain street or whatever. They say you can't build outside this imaginary line until this all gets filled in over the next 20 or 30 years. Meanwhile, there's a farm right across the street that farmland is 1/10 of the cost of residential land, and that could have houses on it, or a lot of houses, which would bring the prices down because you'd have competition.
They don't want to talk about the things that the market seems to want to pay for if people were just free to build it, which is, more smaller, maybe duplexes and triplexes, maybe more single-family homes, maybe more suburbs. They really don't want that as a solution. Some of the disconnect here is the fact that the people who make our laws live in very different places in a very different style than the people who are suffering with the housing crisis that we've talked about. If you live in San Francisco, you may imagine it would be fine if every place looked like San Francisco, but that's not actually what people want.
That's why they're also saying that if you're on a major thoroughfare that has a bus going up and down it, you as a developer aren't required to have any parking. Now that makes no sense. This is not New York City where there's subways and all this interconnection and 4 blocks over you can get to a subway station. This is Southern California, which is spread out.
But actually, that's only part of the story. In recent years, vehicle miles traveled was added as an impact under CEQA. And the meaning of this is, if you want to build a community of houses in an outlying area, the bureaucrats will calculate how many residents will be commuting to work, how many vehicle miles traveled it's going to generate. And this now is an impact, and you can't build your community. 1% of the global climate emissions come from California. This is almost a religious obsession that environmentalists are pushing on people and on politicians who are pushing it on us.
Do you have to have a solar system? Yeah. Do you have to have air conditioning that's very efficient, more expensive? Do you have to have construction techniques that are more expensive? So yeah, you'll have all that, which makes the actual cost higher.
The special interests in California have a huge impact on legislation because similar to regulations, which usually somebody has the bright idea of imposing regulations on people in their industry to keep others out or kind of stifle their business. Special interest does that with legislation. One of the examples, of course, is solar heating or solar energy now is mandatory on every new home built in California. I just paid for a solar system on a home that I'm building and didn't even realize it was mandatory.
The way the rooftop solar subsidies are currently set up in California, people who do not have rooftop solar on their homes are subsidizing people with rooftop solar to the tune of $30 to $50 a month. And it's unfair. It's unfair because some people can't afford rooftop solar. Some people don't have the right kind of home to be able to install rooftop solar. Some people rent, and the owner of their rental unit simply will not install rooftop solar. And some people live in the shade, and so rooftop solar is simply not a viable option for them.
Every envelope you open from a utility has a warning in it that you're using too much of something. You're creating too much garbage, or you're using too much electricity, or you're using too much water. These basic services that government is supposed to provide. Picking up the trash, making sure that when you plug your iPhone into the wall, it charges. These are basic services in other places, but in California, it's a giant guilt trip. And then when they raise your rates, people are saying, well, at least they let me use water.
The thing to look at is who are you losing? So California is becoming more stratified where the wealthy are staying because they can be here and they don't have to worry about crime or other things. They have gated communities. And nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying they don't have to worry about things that the middle class has to worry about. And then if you're the poor in California, your life is more subsidized than, let's say, the middle class person is.
If we don't change our ways, the middle class will not be able to afford to live here.
And we already see this. We know that people who are struggling to make ends meet will forego medication and make other sacrifices in order to be able to pay for both their housing and their electricity and other energy costs.
My electric bill would normally be $50. They added another $49, one for the clean air electric and the other one just regular fees. So yeah, it's disheartening to know that the government is doing that, adding on.
Marilyn Rivera is a single grandmother and property manager who makes about $60,000 a year.
This is my office right here.
She's deciding to leave the state because the cost of living is so high here.
It doesn't give anybody any room to get sick, to take a day off of work, to have an accident, to have an unforeseen circumstance like I did.
So we can go.
I had to go ahead and take custody of my grandson and fight for him. During that 4 years, I maxed out my credit cards, putting down for retainer fees, my savings, my retirement. I ended up getting more and more bills. And it's a domino effect.
Despite her situation, she's not getting any government support.
I've applied for food stamps. When I give them all my information, they're like, oh, we can't count this, we can't count this, we can't count this. And they're like, nope, you're making this. But I'm not taking home that because they actually go by your gross. They don't go by what you take home. I'm considered single in the state of California, and they take everything from me. They give to the ones that know how to work the system, and the ones that really need it, you don't have access to it. You don't have access to it.
She has 3 jobs. She's doing whatever she can. She doesn't have any free time. From what it looks like, she's spending all her free time on making these soaps, writing books, and she's trying so hard to make it.
I've written to every state representative here, and what's funny is you don't even get that generic correspondence that they give to constituents. You don't even get that. But if I had a chance, I'd tell them, hey, live a day or two in our shoes. It's not easy when you have to just eat oatmeal. When you see Topper's Pizza or something coming through and your grandson's like, oh, I'd like to have that.
In a sense, Marilyn's story represents 3.3 million households in California. That's about 25% of households in California that have no cushion for any expense that's unforeseen.
California is reporting a drop in the state's population. A lot of it has to do with costs of living.
When I go to my favorite restaurants that were just normal food, my everyday restaurants that I used to go to when I live here, a lunch is $30 now, you know? But when you've got, $30 for an average lunch and you've got $7 at the pump, and your one-bedroom apartment is $2,700 in North Hollywood.
So let's take a normal community that's, say, Fresno County or Kings County or Tulare County, where I live. If you go to an average August afternoon, it's about 108, and you will see people go into the local Walmart. And they're not going there to purchase things, they're going there to find free air conditioning. Because they can't afford, even at subsidized rates for being poor, they can't afford to turn on their air conditioning because the rates are so high. The rates are so high deliberately so that people will not use air conditioning. And they're set by people who live here. Notice in this office, I don't have any air conditioning.
Which we're in Stanford right now.
Yes, we're at Stanford. And so the people who set policy, whether it's on electric prices or fuel prices, they're never subject to the consequences of their own ideology.
To reduce greenhouse gas emissions marginally in this state, we have this very expensive program called Cap and Trade, which is a hidden tax on energy. It's on refineries, it's on utilities, it's on manufacturing, it's on everything. So this extra tax, it adds to the price of gasoline, it adds to the price of diesel fuel, it adds to the price of everything that's made or moved in California. Your electric bill, your water bill. In California, water is pumped around the state with electric pumps, so part of the cost of water is the cost of electricity. It is raising the cost of living in California throughout the economy. Now, if we're going to pay more for utilities, we should be using the money to fix the infrastructure or to fix the drinking water quality in some places, and we're not. We're just paying it to this greenhouse gas reduction fund in Sacramento. And what happens to the money in that? It's being used to build the bullet train. The bullet train, which was promised to be from San Francisco to Los Angeles and is currently scheduled one day to go from Madera to Bakersfield.
But also what's happening is it's almost as if they're trying to outdo each other with these hyperbolic pieces of legislation that are passing. The governor just signed 40 climate change bills. 40 climate change bills. And frankly, we are the cleanest state in the entire country.
There's no other jurisdiction in the world that's doing what the state of California is doing.
Gas mowers will one day be a thing of the past. A revolutionary plan that would ban the sale of new gas-powered vehicles.
Ban on gas stoves.
Banning new gas leaf blowers.